everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline and I create crafting content here on YouTube. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make these really fun pom-pom mittens. So these are knit out of super bulky yarn, so they're really fast knit. And so what I'm going to show you in this video is first how to knit the mitten. So we're going to start off by casting on and joining in the round. Then we're going to knit our ribbing, work the thumb increases, place the thumb stitches on the waste yarn, continue working up the mitten, then work our decreases. Then we're going to go back and finish off the thumb. Then at the end, you have the option of adding on these really fun little pom-poms, which I think just make them look even more adorable. That's probably my favorite part of these mittens. So I'll explain to you exactly how I made these and how to attach them to the mitten. And then in a separate video, which I'll be putting out later this week, I'm going to be showing you how to put a fleece lining into your mittens. So I'm sure everyone's noticed before that sometimes when you put on hand knit mittens, right, you can still feel that it's a little bit cold outside. So by adding a fleece lining, that really helps keep them extra warm and also just make them super cozy. And I think, to be honest, you can probably barely tell that this mitten has a fleece lining inside of it, right? This one does, this one doesn't. So it just adds an extra layer of warmth, and I think it makes a really fun touch, especially if you're giving these as a gift or something. So keep an eye out for that video later this week. Down in the description box below, you're going to find a few things. First, you're going to find the link to the PDF pattern for this, and these mittens are available in a couple different sizes. Then you're also going to find the different video breakpoints, so that way you can fast forward or rewind to any section of the video that you're looking for. And you're also going to find the subscribe button down below, so if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that red subscribe button so you stay up to date on all my videos. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below, and let's get started. This is the yarn that I used for my project, and what this yarn is it's basically a white yarn, and then held together with the white yarn, the manufacturer put a little tiny strand of pom-poms, and I just think it makes the cutest look. I'd never seen anything like this before. And so this one is Baby Bee. It's called Sugar Pom-Pom. The main drawback here is that you only get 52 yards. So these are pretty small skeins of yarn. If you're looking for a comparable yarn, you want to look for something that recommends around a size US 15. And again, there's only 52 yards or 48 meters. To make this smaller size, you need about 65 yards. So you actually need 2 of these balls of yarn to make that one. So the knitting needle size I'm going to be using is the recommended US 15. Now, if you are a loose knitter, so what I mean by that is when you cast on and you have your stitches on your knitting needle, if they move around very easily and there's like extra space in each one of your stitches, then I would recommend going down a smaller knitting needle size, so maybe go down to a US 13. That's just to prevent your mittens from being too large. We are knitting this in the round, so there's different knitting needle options. I knit everything in the round using magic loop, so I'm using a circular knitting needle, and you want your cord to be at least 24 inches. Then if you're using double pointed needles, of course you can use those as well. Just in the video, whenever I say, join in the round or something like that, just make sure you're just doing the equivalent on double pointed needles. The other materials you're gonna need is you're gonna need a tapestry needle, a piece of waste yarn, and 1 stitch marker. And that's all we need to complete this project. Then if you want to add on the extra little pom-poms, I'll talk about those at the end. In the pattern down below, there are a couple different sizes. The size I'm knitting in this video is the adult small. So in that case, I'm going to cast on a total of 16 stitches. And I would recommend you use a looser cast on method, so something like the long tail cast on or the German twisted cast on. Okay, so now I've cast on my 16 stitches, so I'm going to join in the round. And again, I knit using magic loop, so that's the way I'm going to join in the round. If you're curious about learning how to knit mittens on magic loop, or even learning mittens 2 at a time on magic loop, which you can definitely do with these mittens, I have different videos for that down below, so I'll be sure to link those. So now we're going to be working the ribbing for the cuff. So to do that, we're just going to work knit 1, purl 1, and we're going to repeat that all the way across the round. So just do knit 1, bring your yarn to the front, purl 1, and repeat for every stitch. And we're going to continue to do that round after round until our work measures 3 inches from the cast on edge to the bottom of the knitting needle. So for example here, I want to measure 3 inches from down here at the bottom to the bottom of my knitting needle. And then I'll come back and show you the next step once I'm up to this point. Sorry, it's a little hard to see because the pom-poms are in the way, but the ribbing ends right there. Now I finished the ribbing portion, so next I'm going to set up for the thumb increases. So there's just a few setup rows before we begin the increases. So what I do first is I'm just going to knit 2 full rounds. On this next round, I'm going to need my stitch marker, so I have that ready. So what I want to do is I want to start off the round doing a make 1 left. Now doing a make 1 left at the beginning of a round can be kind of tricky. So if you're on double pointed needles, you want to make 1 left into the bar in between basically where your beginning of the round marker is and where your first stitch is. You want to increase right in between those two. If you're doing magic loop, I want to make 1 left into this bar right here that's in between the stitches on my back needle and the stitches on my front knitting needle. So to do that, what I do is I just kind of stretch out my work right here on the side. Now I'm going to take my left knitting needle point and go underneath that bar from front to back. And now I'm just going to knit right into the back of that loop. So I've just created 1 stitch right at the beginning of the round. Now I want to place my stitch marker. And now I'm going to continue knitting the rest of this round. Now that I've completed that first increase round, again, I'm going to knit 2 full rounds. Now the next thumb increase round is going to be the one that we repeat. So for this one, again, we want to make 1 left at the beginning of the round. So I'm going to stretch out my work, look for that bar, front to back underneath the bar, knit into the back of the loop. Then you want to knit until your stitch marker. So for this round, it's just knit 1. And then we want to do a make 1 right. So to do a make 1 right, again, we look for the bar in between the stitch we just worked and the one we're about to work. And in this case, we're going to go back to front underneath that bar and then knit into the front of that loop. Now I'm going to pass my stitch marker and I'm going to continue knitting across the rest of this round. Now that I've completed knitting that increase round, again, I want to knit 2 full rounds. And that's the way these thumb increases are going to work. So first we're going to do 1 thumb increase round, which is where we make 1 left, knit until the stitch marker, make 1 right, pass the stitch marker, knit the rest of the round, and then knit 2 full rounds in between each one. Now for this next step, I have my tapestry needle and waste yarn all ready, and I just threaded it right onto my tapestry needle. So what I want to do is I want to take those thumb stitches and just pass them right onto the waste yarn. I'm also going to take off my stitch marker now. And once I have them on the waste yarn, I just like to tie this into a little bow just to keep it out of the way and make it easier to untie later on. And then typically I tie or put those ends into the inside of the mitten just to keep them out of the way. So now all I do is just rejoin in the round. So basically just pretend like those thumb stitches were never there. And now I'm going to continue knitting round after round for another 3 inches. The last thing we have to do up at the top of the mittens is do our decrease rounds. So the way these decreases work is first we're gonna work one decrease round, then we're gonna knit one full round. So the decrease round is knit one, then work a slip, slip, knit. So slip the first stitch as if to knit, slip the second stitch as if to knit, pass them both back over to the left hand needle, then knit those two together through the back. So we just went from 2 stitches down to that 1 stitch. Then on these first half of the stitches, you want to knit until 3 stitches remain. So I want to knit 2. Then in these 2 stitches, I'm going to work a knit 2 together. So I just take my right knitting needle point into 2 stitches at the same time, wrap my yarn around, pull through. Then I want to knit 1 stitch. Now I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to repeat that exact same thing again. So I'm going to knit 1, work a slip, slip, pass them both back over to the left needle, knit them together through the back loop. So slip, slip, knit. Then I'm going to knit 2, knit the final 2, knit the next 2 stitches together, do a knit 2 together, and then knit the final stitch. So that is our decrease round. So that round was knit 1, slip, slip, knit 2, knit 2 together, knit 1, slip, slip, knit 2, knit 2 together, knit 1. So now we've decreased 4 stitches down. So after that round, I'm just gonna knit 1 full round. Now again, I'm gonna work another decrease round. So for this round, I'm gonna knit 1, work a slip, slip, knit, knit 2 together, knit 1. Now I'm gonna turn my work. Knit 1, slip, slip, knit, knit 2 together, knit 1. Now that I've finished that second decrease round, I'm gonna bind off my stitches, and the way I'm gonna do that is using Kitchener's stitch. So what I do is I'm gonna break my yarn, and I'm gonna leave, let's say, probably about an 18-inch tail. I always like to have extra. And then I'm gonna use my tapestry needle. I do find this yarn is really hard to get onto tapestry needles. Okay, went on pretty well that time. And now for Kitchener stitch, there's a 2-step setup and then a 4-step repeat. So first I'm gonna show you the 2 setup steps, then I'll go through the repeat 1 time, and then I'll just put the repeat on the screen because I think it's almost harder if I just keep on narrating it. So the 2 setup stitches are, first, I'm gonna take my tapestry needle and I'm gonna go through the first stitch on my front knitting needle as if to purl, pull the yarn through, but leave that stitch on the knitting needle. Now I want to go through my first stitch on my back knitting needle. So take your tapestry needle underneath that front knitting needle, go into the first stitch on the back knitting needle as if to knit, pull your yarn through, leave that stitch on the knitting needle. So those are the 2 setup stitches. Now there's a 4-stitch repeat. So first, I'm going to take my tapestry needle into the first stitch on my front knitting needle as if to knit. Now I'm going to slide that stitch off my front knitting needle. Now I'm going to take my tapestry needle into my new first stitch on my front knitting needle as if to purl. Leave that stitch on the front knitting needle. Next, I'm going to take my tapestry needle through the first stitch on my back knitting needle as if to purl. Slide that stitch off the back knitting needle. Now I'm going to go through my new first stitch on my back knitting needle as if to knit. Keep that stitch on the back knitting needle. So now I'll put the repeat up on the screen, and as I'm going along, I don't pull too tight, but I do gently tug on these just to tighten it up a little bit along the edge, and that way you'll be able to see the actual stitches forming. So now I'm going to continue repeating until I've cast off all the stitches. And at the end, you won't be able to complete a full repeat of Kitchener stitch. So all I do when I get there is I knit through the first stitch on the front knitting needle, slide that stitch off. Then I can't purl onto that new first stitch on the front knitting needle, so I just go right to the back knitting needle, purl through that one remaining stitch, slide that stitch off. And then I weave this end into the inside of my work, and then I'll weave that in later. So there's the Kitchener stitch across the top of the mitten. So the last thing we have to do here is the thumb. And the way I work on the thumb is first I just lay the mitten down so the thumb is over towards the left. Then I'm going to take one of my knitting needle points, and starting at this inside corner, I'm going to go around and I'm going to pick up the first half of the stitches. Then I'm going to pull my knitting needle so that the stitches end up on the cord. Turn my work. Now I'm going to pick up the second half of the stitches. And now again, I'm going to put my my mitten down so that the thumb is over towards the left. And now I'm going to cut out or pull out this waste yarn. Now I'm going to rejoin my yarn. So the way I do that is I'm just going to take about 8 inches of yarn and I'm just going to put it right into the thumb opening. And now I'm all ready to knit with this piece of yarn around here. So to start off, I'm going to knit all of the stitches that are on the thumb. So I'm going to knit in my size, I'm going to knit 7. And now before I turn my work to continue on to the next round, I want to pick up one stitch from this inner corner. So you can see that if I just kept on knitting, there'd end up being a hole right here, a pretty large hole. So what I like to do is, there's a couple different places you can pick up a stitch from. I like to try and get the bar that's at the bottom of the side of the mitten, and then the side stitch on one of the sides. So I'm going to pick up this bar, and then over here, I'm going to pick up that stitch. Then I'm going to knit those two together through the back loop. So that'll help to close that gap. Now I have 8 stitches cast on, or 1 more than you started with for the thumb. And now I'm going to continue knitting for around 1 inch. And again, the nice thing about knitting this on Magic Loop is you can try it on. So I can see right now if I tried it on, I'd probably want it to go up until like maybe about midway through my thumbnail. And then we have the cast off round and the bind off. So that'll take it up a little bit further. So again, I'm going to knit for about 1 inch. The final step on the thumb is just going to be to work 1 decrease round. So I'm going to just work knit 2 together, each set of 2 stitches. So for my size, I'm going to go from 8 down to 4 stitches. Then again, I'm going to cut my yarn, and here I'm only going to leave about a 10-inch tail. And I'm going to use my tapestry needle to weave this end through the remaining stitches. So I always just start with the next stitch I would have worked and just thread the tapestry yarn and the tail through each one of those remaining stitches. Now I can just take my knitting needles out, pull this tight to secure, and then weave that onto the inside of the mitten. The last step is to add the pom-poms. So what you want to do first is you want to make sure you don't accidentally put both the sets of pom-poms with the gloves facing the same way. So you want to make sure you have a right and a left glove when you add the pom-poms. Then I made each one of these using a yarn color that was featured in these little pom-poms. But if you're using a speckled yarn, you could choose colors that match the speckles. Or if you have solid colored mittens, of course, you can choose any color you'd like. But what I did is I made these using my smallest size pom-pom maker. I'll put the size up on the screen. And then what I had to do actually is then I had to trim them down further so that they became even smaller. So these are like mini pom-poms. So for reference, they measure about 1 inch in diameter or 2.5 centimeters. So they're pretty tiny. And then I left on the thread that I tied them with. So I have 2 ends to my thread and probably about 10 inches on either side. So what I do is I just lay them down right at the top of the ribbing. So let's say I want the first one to go right here. Then I'm just going to take one of the thread tails, thread that in right at the top of the ribbing. Then I want to take the other thread tail, and then pick like the other side of that stitch so that they don't both go through the same place. And now I'm just going to flip the mitten inside out and tie those 2 strands together a couple times to make sure it stays in place. Then I just cut off those ends. And that's how I place each one of those pom-poms. So now I'm gonna go across and add the other ones. Then the last thing you can do to your mitten that I'll put out in a separate video is you can add a fleece lining to your mitten. So this one has this really nice soft fabric on the inside and it makes the mittens really warm. So that's always an option if you'd like to do that as well. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.